in the golden dining room of an insanely expensive restaurant, with chandeliers sparkling overhead and crystal glasses lined up on the tables. Victoria Hawley, CEO of a major tech company, stopped in her tracks like she'd just taken a punch. Her phone still showed the reservation, but something had gone wrong in the worst way possible: public, humiliating, impossible to pretend it wasn't happening. She was about to turn around and leave when she saw a scene that didn't match all that luxury at all. A mechanic in a work jumpsuit, hands still stained with grease, staring down at the floor as if swallowing his own embarrassment, and a little girl looking up at him, scared and confused. Before anyone reacted, he pulled out an empty chair and made a simple gesture. There was one small detail in that invitation that changed everything. Before we keep going, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from: city, state, or country? Victoria Hall, founder and CEO of a huge Silicon Valley tech company, watched her own reflection in the dark car window while the city glowed outside. Fireworks were already popping in the distance, rehearsing what would come at midnight. But inside the car there was only silence, that expensive, clean, controlled kind of silence that still manages to suffocate you. In her lap, she clutched her phone like it was a good luck charm. And even so, she had no one to call. She was the kind of woman everybody applauds on stage, but nobody actually reaches for when the lights go out. Her success had always been loud on the outside and mute on the inside. Victoria knew exactly how to walk into a room and make everyone straighten up. She knew which words to use to sound confident. She knew how to smile without letting the exhaustion show. But when night came, what was left was that strange feeling of having built an empire, and not having built a place where her heart could actually rest. And if you like stories like this, wrapped in luxury on the outside, but with real truth on the inside, make sure you're subscribed and stay with us. Because sometimes the turning point doesn't come from money at all. It comes from a small gesture at exactly the right moment. Her hunger for approval didn't start now. It started in childhood, in the kind of house where everything was perfect on the surface and affection was always busy. Her father, a respected, cold man, never raised his voice, and maybe that's what hurt the most. He praised grades, posture, performance, but never looked long enough to actually see his daughter. Victoria grew up learning to earn affection like someone chasing a trophy. If she were flawless, maybe she'd finally be loved, and she did become flawless. Only along the way, it got harder and harder to remember what it felt like to just be human. That New Year's Eve, she'd promised herself one simple thing: no work, no emails, no putting out other people's fires. She had a reservation at the most in-demand restaurant on the waterfront, the kind of place where the door feels like a test and the perfume in the air costs more than the meal. It was supposed to be just a dinner, just a table, just one attempt not to spend another New Year's staring at a screen. But when the car pulled up and she saw the Mater D checking lists a little too fast, Victoria felt a knot in her stomach, as if something right there was about to break in the most public way possible. And she had no idea how big the humiliation at that door was going to be. The car stopped in front of the Harbor Light, an elegant restaurant on the San Francisco Bay, where the entrance felt more like a judgment than a doorway. Victoria stepped out in her perfect dress, coat draped over her shoulders, with that trained posture of someone who never apologizes for taking up space. Inside, there were loud laughs, clinking glasses, the discreet flash of cell phones, everyone desperate to record their own happiness. She took a breath and went straight to the Mater D, the kind of man who smiled with his teeth, but measured you with his eyes. He checked the list once, and then checked again. Something in his expression twitched, like his face glitched for a second. "Ma'am, there must have been a system error." The words sounded smooth, but the humiliation landed hard. He tried to explain way too fast, suggested a short wait, talked about reaccommodating her, and right in the middle of his speech, Victoria felt the worst part. People nearby had stopped pretending they weren't listening. All that luxury turned into a spotlight right in her face. Victoria felt her skin heat up, not from anger, from shame. She could fix this with one phone call, with one name, with one title. But in that moment, it would mean admitting she needed to prove something. And she was exhausted from doing exactly that. She pulled her coat a little tighter, as if the fabric could hold her pride in place, and took half a step back, ready to leave before someone turned this into gossip. But from across the dining room, a hand went up like someone calling a waiter, and what it really called was fate. It was Eli Carter, a mechanic whose hands still carried dark smudges of grease, sitting at a simple table near the window, with a little girl who was clearly too young to be awake at that hour. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit or a flashy watch, just a direct, honest gaze that didn't find anyone's humiliation amusing. He stood up, gestured toward the empty chair at his table, and said in a calm voice, "If you want, you can sit with us." Victoria froze, unsure if it was pity or courage. Before she could answer, the little girl tugged at her dad's sleeve and whispered something that made his face change instantly, as if that child had just seen something no adult in that room was willing to see. The little girl was Hazel Carter, and she had a strange way of looking at adults, like she was trying to figure out why they make everything so complicated. She swung her legs under the table, clutching a crumpled napkin in one hand, and watched Victoria as if the expensive dress were just one more pretty color in the room. When she saw Victoria frozen there, Hazel made a little urgent face, tugged at her dad again, and said out loud, "Dad, she's alone." Look at her face. It was simple, no judgment, no malice. Just a sincere observation, like pointing out that it's cold and offering someone your coat. For a second, Eli looked embarrassed. Victoria saw it right away. He wasn't the kind of man who liked to butt in, but he was definitely the kind who couldn't pretend he didn't see when someone needed help. He gave a small, crooked smile, almost apologizing for his boldness, and repeated with more conviction now, "We're not doing anything special, just trying to have dinner. If it helps you not spend the night alone, sit here." The mater d' tried to step in. "Ma'am, we can..." But Victoria didn't even look at him. There was something in that invitation, no strings, no flattery, that knocked down a wall she hadn't even realized was still standing. As Victoria walked toward the table, the dining room light caught Eli's hands. They were working hands, short nails, rough skin, an old scar across his index finger. She'd shaken hands with billionaires, politicians, celebrities. And yet that detail unsettled her more than any boardroom ever had. Hazel pushed the chair out with both little hands and motioned for Victoria to sit, like she was welcoming someone into her own home. "I'm Hazel," she said proudly, "and this is my dad. He fixes everything." Victoria almost smiled. Hidden inside that "fixes everything" was one thing Eli couldn't fix. When the waitress brought water, Hazel asked for hot chocolate, "So we can celebrate for real." And while she stirred the straw, she dropped a line as casually as talking about the weather. Mom would have liked this place, but she went to heaven. The rest of the room stayed loud, but at their table, a different kind of silence fell thick, heavy. Eli lowered his eyes for a second, took a deep breath, and ran his hand through his hair, trying not to crumble. Victoria understood in that moment. This man carried a loss that didn't show in his clothes or his wallet. It showed in the way he held on to his own life. And right then, with Hazel looking at Victoria as if she already belonged at that table, Victoria understood the risk and the promise of that night. Taking that chair wasn't just accepting a place to sit. It was letting someone get close, After so long, that was what scared her the most and what she needed more than anything. But before the conversation could even begin properly, someone in the dining room recognized Victoria, whispered her name, and faces started turning toward their table, like that scene wasn't allowed to exist in a place like this. Victoria felt the weight of the stares before she heard the whispers. It wasn't a direct attack, it was worse. That kind of toxic curiosity that sizes you up and stuffs you into a box. And the box that was obvious. What is she doing with them? For the first time in a long time, though, Victoria didn't feel like proving anything. She simply pulled the chair out slowly, draped her coat over the back, and sat down. The delicate fabric of her dress brushed against the plain wooden chair, and the ridiculous contrast made Hazel grin like it was the most natural thing in the world. Eli tried to break the ice his way, without a performance. "Sorry about all this," he said, nodding toward the room, acknowledging the situation without milking it. Victoria shrugged, but her voice came out softer than usual. "This isn't the first time someone has tried to make me feel out of place. It just usually happens in different places." Hazel frowned, confused. "But you're pretty, and you look like, I don't know, a sad queen." Victoria let out a short, involuntary laugh, and it was like the air at the table shifted. Eli gave his daughter a look that was half pride, half panic. Hazel. She didn't care. The conversation started out shy, but it grew the way fire catches on paper. Eli talked about his shop in Oakland, about how hard it was to keep the business alive without cutting corners, without making fake promises, without selling people repairs they didn't need. He spoke carefully, too, about how empty the house felt after his wife died, how he sometimes caught himself talking out loud in the kitchen just to pretend someone was still there. Victoria listened without interrupting, without fixing, without handing out advice. For the first time that night, she wasn't the person solving problems. She was just someone listening, and that felt like a physical relief, like finally kicking off a pair of heels after hours. Hazel, in her own way, brought life to the center of the table. She complained that her dad doesn't know how to make pasta right, that he uses way too much butter, and that she's the one who remembers to buy batteries for the TV remote. Then she turned to Victoria and asked, with the most dangerous kind of innocence, "Do you have somebody? Like, for real?" Victoria froze for half a second. It was a tiny question, but it hit where everything hurt. Eli fiddled with his glass, not sure where to look. Victoria swallowed and answered with raw honesty, "I think I have a lot of people around me, but no one with me." Hazel nodded like she understood perfectly and pushed a piece of bread toward her. "Then eat with us." Between one story and the next, Victoria started noticing things she hadn't seen in her own life for years. Laughter without calculation, comfortable silence, affection that didn't expect anything in return. The sound of Hazel's silverware hitting the plate, the way Eli looked at his daughter before answering anything. As if her opinion really mattered, none of that would impress a luxury crowd, but it felt rare. And without even realizing it, Victoria started talking too. She admitted she hated gala events. She confessed she couldn't remember the last time she ate without checking the time. And suddenly, she was actually smiling, really smiling. Not that practiced, camera-ready version. Meanwhile, the rest of the dining room was closing in like a tide. A man in a tailored suit walked by too slowly, too close, and muttered a comment in Eli's direction. Brave or desperate? Eli pretended not to hear, but Victoria heard every word. She watched something change in his face. Not anger, not fear. A quiet kind of shame, as if he'd suddenly remembered where the world thought he belonged. And right there, in that split second, Victoria understood the biggest challenge of the night wasn't the restaurant at all. It was what their different worlds were going to do to them once midnight hit. The countdown started appearing on discrete screens around the dining room, and the whole restaurant seemed to breathe in the same rhythm. Servers sped up, glasses appeared from nowhere. People stood to record videos, and the music turned louder, as if the place needed to prove it was happy. At the table by the window, the mood was different. Hazel rested her chin on her hands and watched the lights outside, fascinated. Every so often, Eli glanced at his watch, not because he was in a hurry, but because his nerves didn't know what to do. Victoria caught herself thinking something strange. For a long time, she hadn't wanted to be anywhere. But here, she wanted to stay. "You're really spending New Year's here?" Eli asked, trying to sound casual, but the question carried weight. Victoria answered with a quiet kind of honesty. "I planned all this as an attempt not to spend the night alone." She didn't say again, but it was there between the words. Hazel looked at her like it was absurd that anyone had to plan to have company. "Then you nailed it," the girl declared, smacking her little hand on the table like she was closing a deal. "Because now you're with us." Victoria laughed through her nose, almost emotional, and shook her head. Sometimes kids have a cruel way of calling the simple things simple. When there were only a few seconds left, the Mater D walked by with a tight expression, as if he still didn't approve of what he was seeing. Victoria noticed, but didn't move. Eli pulled out a plain bottle he'd ordered, no famous label, no flexing, and poured their drinks with an almost ceremonial care. Hazel got soda and pretended it was kid champagne. The whole restaurant started shouting the numbers, and Victoria felt her chest seize with that old feeling. Being surrounded by people and still completely separate from everything. But this time, a small hand touched her arm. Hazel's. Small, warm, real. 10-9. Eli raised his glass. Victoria followed, not entirely sure what to do with all of it. 3-2. The noise was deafening. And when 1 hit, fireworks exploded outside. The restaurant turned into a blur of hugs and kisses and shouting. Hazel jumped up on her chair and threw her hands in the air. Eli smiled, but his smile carried a shadow. Victoria noticed, and before she could retreat back into herself, Eli lifted his glass a little higher and said, with no speech, no performance, looking at his daughter first, and then at Victoria, "A toast. To the good people we meet by accident." The sentence slid into Victoria like a soft blade. It wasn't grand. It wasn't a moral lesson. It was just true. And maybe that's why it hurt so much. She heard speeches in huge rooms, under bright lights and roaring applause, that didn't mean half as much as that one line. She tried to answer, but her voice caught, so she just touched her glass to his. Hazel clinked her plastic cup too, proud, as if she were sealing a pact. In that instant, Victoria knew something inside her had shifted, but she still had no idea what it was going to cost when their worlds really collided. The glow of the fireworks was still trembling in the windows when reality started pushing in. A polished couple walked by their table and tossed out a Happy New Year. It sounded more like mockery than kindness, aiming a particular look at Eli that needed no translation. Victoria felt it immediately, and for the first time that night, it wasn't the restaurant that embarrassed her. It was watching someone try to shrink another human being in front of a child. Hazel, oblivious to the social code, just squeezed her father's hand under the table like she was saying, "I've got you." Eli tried to keep his composure, but his insecurity leaked out in the details. The way he pulled at his simple collar, the way he scrubbed at his fingers with the napkin, like the grease stains were some kind of sin. "You don't have to stay here because of us," he muttered quietly, like he was offering her an exit before things got uglier. Victoria looked around the dining room and answered without drama, almost tired. "I'm not staying because of you. I'm staying because I want to. And as soon as she said it, she realized how heavy that sentence was. Wanting, for her, had never been safe. That's when a man appeared like he had every right to walk straight into that scene. It was Bradley Knox, a powerful investor in her circle, someone who toasted with Victoria at huge events, but now looked at her like she was breaking some unspoken rule. He flashed a half smile and said, "Victoria, you disappeared, and I find you here?" The "here" came loaded. Hazel looked from him to Victoria, not understanding the game, and that made it even crueler. Eli started to rise, ready to give the chair back and end the scene before it turned into a spectacle. Victoria didn't let it happen. She stood up too, and it wasn't the graceful, photo-ready kind of move. It was firm, human, the move of someone who refused to shrink. "He offered me a seat when your favorite restaurant offered me humiliation," she said, calm but cutting. Bradley gave a short, incredulous laugh. And that is when Victoria did the one thing nobody expected. She turned her back on the entire dining room, grabbed her coat, and said to Eli and Hazel, like it was the most natural thing in the world, "Let's get out of here." As they stepped outside, the cold bay air hit their faces like a shock, and at the same time, like relief. Hazel blew out a breath and laughed, as if they'd just escaped some invisible trap, and automatically reached for Victoria's hand. Eli paused on the sidewalk, staring at the street like he had no idea where to file this memory in his life. Victoria didn't know either. She just knew that, for the first time in years, she'd chosen a person over an image. If this part hit something inside you, tell me in the comments what spoke to you most, because what looked like a rushed exit was about to turn into a much bigger decision, and it would come before that night was over. In the days after that strange New Year's, Victoria tried to do what she'd always done: shove everything into a mental drawer and move on. But all it took was one glance at her phone to remember the feeling of Hazel's hand on her arm, like that child had given life permission to step in. She sent Eli a short message, no poetic line, no drama, just, "Did you guys get home okay?" His reply was just as simple, with a blurry photo attached. Hazel asleep in the car, wrapped in a coat far too big for her. Victoria stared at that picture longer than she meant to, like she was looking at a kind of peace she'd never had the courage to buy. The first time she showed up at the shop was almost comical. The place smelled like oil, hot metal, and old coffee. Tools hanging on the walls, a radio low in the background playing classic rock, and Eli turned away, arguing with a customer about brakes and safety. When he turned and saw Victoria standing in the doorway, not sure what to do with her hands, his face froze. "You? Lost?" he asked, half serious, half amused. Victoria took a breath and said, "I think I'm finding myself." Hazel popped out from behind a workbench with a huge smile, ran, and wrapped her arms around Victoria's waist like this was already normal. Eli watched that and, for a split second, looked truly happy and absolutely terrified. The clash between their worlds came fast, and it didn't come gently. At the office, people in her circle started testing the waters with little jabs. "You're involved with a mechanic?" As if they were pointing out a wrong turn on the GPS. On Eli's side, some people treated the whole thing as a joke or a threat, hinting that he was getting ahead of himself, or that a woman like that only toys with regular guys. Eli tried to shrug it off, but Victoria saw the truth in the small things. Him going quiet, turning down invitations, avoiding his own reflection, like he didn't want to see himself in that role. One night, when he finally muttered, "You're gonna get tired of me," Victoria answered as directly as she knew how. "I got tired of people who only know how to want me for what I look like." When the decision to really be together became impossible to dodge, there was no big announcement. There were small, steady choices. Victoria started showing up more at the shop. Eli showed up in her world, just enough to understand how loud it could get. Hazel became the bridge between them with an ease that shut up a lot of arguments. And the next year, in a simple courtyard lit by string lights and decorated with ribbons, Hazel had picked out one by one. They said, "I do," without a gala crowd, without a scripted speech, just truth. While everyone toasted their new beginning, Victoria kept her hand on an envelope in her bag longer than she needed to. And Eli noticed. Whatever step she was about to take wasn't just about love. It was about walking away from the top in a way no one expected. 3 years passed, and if someone looked only from the outside, they'd say Victoria had stepped down from the top. But on the inside, it felt like the opposite. It was as if she was finally breathing again. She was no longer the CEO who fell asleep with her laptop open and woke up with her head full of numbers. Now, her calendar carried a different kind of weight. Visits to community programs, meetings with school principals, long conversations with young people who had never once heard someone say, "I believe in you," without wanting something back. The foundation she built didn't plaster her name everywhere. It focused on impact. Mentoring, scholarships, tech workshops in forgotten neighborhoods, and above all, real people actually listening to real people. Victoria was still sharp, demanding, and smart. But her obsession shifted. The hunger for approval turned into a quieter responsibility, doing something that didn't depend on applause. And every time someone tried to dismiss it as PR or rich girl guilt, she remembered that table at the Harbor Light and what one simple gesture had done to her life. Eli kept running the shop in Oakland's same dirty hands, tough routine, that quiet pride of someone who builds life with his own two hands. The difference now was that their home had more laughter and a lot more chaos. Hazel had grown into a sharp, endlessly curious kid, and she now had a little sister, June, a tiny hurricane who could wreck a room in 10 seconds flat. Victoria, who once panicked at the idea of letting anyone in, now learned to live among toys on the floor, dishes in the sink, and surprise hugs in the hallway. Every now and then, she'd catch herself standing still in the corridor just listening to the girls play, like she needed to double-check. Is this really my life? Every New Year's, they went back to the Harbor Light. Not for revenge, for remembrance. They sat near the window, ordered simple dishes, and Victoria made a point of looking at the door for a moment, as if she could see that old version of herself walking in again. Only now, that version didn't walk in alone. That night, while Hazel argued with the menu, and June dropped her straw on the floor for the third time, Victoria realized something important. The most valuable part of this whole story wasn't what she gained. It was what she didn't lose when she accepted that chair. And that's where the real twist hides when we talk about wealth, because it's not always about money. That night started with a mistake meant to shrink Victoria in front of everyone, and ended reminding her that the worst kind of loneliness isn't having nobody around. It is having nobody who truly sees you. In the middle of all the shine, status, and noise, it was one ordinary man and one brave little girl who made room for something no amount of money can buy: genuine welcome. Now let me ask you, what would you have done in Eli's place? Would you have pulled out that chair? Or pretended you didn't see what was happening? And in Victoria's shoes, would you have sat down, even with your pride burning? Tell us in the comments which part hit you the hardest, or if you've ever lived something that felt even a little bit similar. If this story kept you here until the end, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Because sometimes life doesn't change because of a perfect plan, but because of a small, brave gesture at exactly the right minute.